What's going on, everyone, and welcome to the Bot Podcast, where we interview movers, shakers, and innovators and talk all things conversational user interfaces. I'm your host, Chad Oda, and today we have a very special guest, Alex Spinelli, the CTO of LivePerson. Alex has been an executive in a number of high-profile companies, ranging from McCann Worldwide to Viacom to AXA, and finally to LivePerson here. Yeah. So at that, Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks. This is exciting.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we get into the more sort of questions around chatbots or voice user interfaces, always like to sort of pull back and ask a unique question from someone's background. So I know we were talking about that you had worked as the CTO of Viacom previously. So do you, what from that experience have you sort of drawn into this new experience at LivePerson here? Because there's sort of two different worlds, but at the same time, we do see things that are similar. For example, we see that conversational copywriting and UX is really important. And what we see today is a lot of people taking some insights or skill sets from the film industry and pulling that into this space here.
Yeah. So, it's funny that you mentioned it. So it was actually the Chief Technology Officer for Comedy Central, which is a division of Viacom. And we did a lot of interesting things. It was actually an interesting time where digital was actually just becoming the thing it was. Yeah. So we were moving a lot of the core content online and making it searchable and building the first websites for South Park and The Man Show and The Chappelle Show and those kinds of things. So I got to work with some of those folks, and they were really, really fun. I think the biggest piece that I would say I've kept with me is we built something called homegrown humor. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of YouTube before YouTube.
Sweet.
And we allowed viewers to come and create their own content. Mm-hmm. And this is really before there was Vine or user-generated content. And it was actually a fairly sizable success.
Interesting.
And the business model actually was at odds with it because the company was trying to figure out what to do with all of this content. Actually, a couple of really innovative folks ended up making their way into the company. And there were some shows developed from it. But I think for me, actually, it was very eye-opening in... I had been primarily focused on digital content at the time, web, and working with lots of other forms of data, information. Video is just a type of data, and trying to understand what the content was, how to actually search, how to index it, how to think about personalizing information and content, making sure people found the things that were interesting to them. So I think I've kept a lot of that thinking in how data is data across many dimensions, and how actually finding the insights and the things that actually help you link and drive the right data to me at the right time, no matter what it is, across different types of communication mediums, from video to voice to texting, is so important. So I think that's something I definitely have kind of continued to think through and iterate on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think the interesting thing is, from that and your perspective on how you sort of saw the data, fast forward to maybe, the past 5 years when you were working at Amazon, I think you were sort of in charge of search or drove a lot of that initiative. And then from that sort of was driven into, you were the ex-head of Alexa OS, right? So from that sort of shift, how did you sort of actually get into voice? Because I sort of see these successive steps of, looking at data from a search perspective and understanding that, and then going into Amazon, and search is huge for them. Because so many people land on that home page. It's how do I get what I need as fast as possible? And then finally the Amazon Alexa speaker comes into place here. Yeah. And now it's this new incredible touch point for hundreds of millions of consumers around the world. So how did you sort of transition into that space?
So if there's one theme through my whole career, and I talk about this a lot and with career advice and those kinds of things, what's a common thread? What's the thing that excites you? And it's always been this concept of the vast sums of information and data that we generate, and finding the thing that's interesting for me, the insight from that data. So that's kind of I've worked at financial services firms, video related and entertainment, news, But there's this kind of underlying theme of I'm passionate about using technology to help humans gain insight from the information overload, right? And it's just getting worse, right? So that's kind of a theme that's carried on. And I've been in machine learning or AI. We didn't call it AI. I mean, AI was like hot 15, 20 years ago. Neural networks, and we stopped calling it AI, and then it was machine learning, text analytics. So I've created, machine readable news, systems for understanding insight and data, for algorithmic trading, those kinds of things, even going back to Thomson Reuters. But the sort of topic has always been this insight from big data. So search has been a tool that I've been involved with for a long time. When I was trying to improve the customer experience at Amazon with search, we started to find a lot of people starting to ask questions of search. Right, so they weren't just typing keywords, they weren't just typing product names, they actually wanted to use search to ask a question.
So like long form
questions, conversational search.
Interesting.
And more about the products, about compatibilities, about Amazon, about their accounts, all these different things. So sort of experimenting with a lot of conversational experiences, we started creating something we called query understanding. How can we actually recognize intent in the queries and understand the entities and the facts that were embedded in the queries. This is common stuff. But we really wanted to sort of connect those into the human and the customer experience to actually help guide you, help answer those questions, help think about search well beyond just products. So as Alexa started to take root, and it was very early days, I got exposed to it as a beta user in Amazon. And the voice part, to me, to be honest, is kind of almost tangential. It's really more about understanding my intent, understanding what is in here, using different tools for me to communicate that. I could type it in a search, I could speak it, and then getting me what I want and what I need. So I went from search to Alexa really to kind of follow that thread of understanding intent, understanding insight from the sort of information overload. And I think with voice and with chatbots even today, with conversational experiences, actually gives me an opportunity to kind of narrow in on what is the thing that I'm asking for, or the consumer is asking for, and how do I go and find it? And it almost cuts all the other cruft away. Like there's no more app, there's no more website, there's no more search. It's actually my intent and then the answers. And so that was kind of a natural progression. And then a natural progression here, Amazon's sort of creating the window to the world with conversational experiences. And what we're doing here is actually helping the world's biggest brands that we all use every day in our lives, our banks, our telcos, our utilities, largest retail, to actually leverage the same type of technologies. So I love Amazon. I think it's a great company, a tremendous amount of appreciation. But I wanted to come here and in an interesting way. I came to a smaller company to, I think, have a bigger impact in pushing forward this new experience, this new interface that I think starts to do what I'm passionate about. I have something I want an insight. How do I get it? So it's kind of maybe a meandering path, but there's a theme there underneath.
No, like I totally see the trajectory because like it's so interesting. We look at like customer experience over the past like maybe 50 years, right? The advent of web and then search, and it's been like, how do we abstract the complexity of giving people what they want, right? We see search as this sort of like, it's not really a bi-directional conversation. We have to be very precise with the keywords that we put in. So then, moving towards voice or chatbots and that layer of, complexity we're taking out, and it's much more conversational. It's that common thread where we're almost coming full circle to what customer experience was like maybe 50 years or 100 years ago, right? It was talking to a sales rep at a department store. And I feel like we're almost getting back to maybe those roots in maybe a more simplified version, provided the technology and best practices that exist. I just see it's a really interesting trend where it's like, technology provided the opportunity to do things at scale, automation at scale, but it removed that human element, that conversational element, and now we're like tracking back to that almost, right? I think it's a really interesting trend.
So I've prepared for a lot of interviews. I was going to do this. I didn't do it. I won't say with who. But I was told I was going to be challenged around the very words you just said. We're getting back to this conversational experience. So what I wanted to do, I didn't
Yeah.
do it, but actually this will hit the point, was
Yeah.
bring a laptop
Yeah.
and say, well, instead of actually having a conversation like this to exchange ideas and information, I just brought a microsite.
Yeah.
So I'm going to open up the microsite, reporter.
Right.
You can type questions.
Yeah.
You could browse.
Yeah.
I have an FAQ, and we'll use the experience that we all use online and in our apps. That's how we'll have this interview.
Right.
It sounds ridiculous,
Yeah.
right? Completely ridiculous.
Right.
That's what the web is right now.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't do that for this conversation.
Right.
I don't think it would be very fun for everyone watching or listening. Like, here, type on my microsite.
Here's a link below.
Here's use some search.
Yeah.
Browse. No, conversations are better, right? Conversations are nonlinear.
Yeah.
They allow us to sort of follow ideas. They allow us to exchange information and data in real time in a dynamic and flexible way. They're natural. It's how we live and breathe. They will become visual as well. I think today we speak to Alexa or you type in messaging to chatbots. They're going to start to be paired with multimodal experiences because we are very visual creatures. We're audio creatures. So I think the drive isn't. We're not. This is like not the next. It's the next iteration of technology, but actually we are starting to get to a place where technology can start to fade away, and we can actually start to interact using digital proxies in the way that's natural, right? So I do think we kind of had this interesting detour with the web and apps because of limitations of technology. Like the hamburger menu, you've heard me talk about this before, like that was the big innovation. Like, oh, how do I, on my phone, there's a very limited space. It's more space now. Oh, the innovation is the hamburger menu. And then the next one was the 3-dot menu. Like it's ridiculous when you think about it. There's nothing natural about it. Swiping, it's cool. It's great. It's space efficient. It's not natural. These are not things that we don't want to swipe each other. So I think technology is starting to get to a place where AI and machine learning can actually start to replicate our communication. We can actually start to remove it. We have a customer, very big telco, and he talks about how businesses over the last number of years have built a digital fortress. Right? They have an IVR, they have their website, they have their this, they have their that, they have all these things. And they measure themselves and how, or they used to, this company's changed this way of thinking and how they deflect or defer. Like you're deflecting customers away and deflecting people who want to give you money. And in reality, actually, we want to be inviting people in, have dialogues. If you were building a business 50 years ago, like your goal was like, you want more people to come talk to you.
I want to go talk to them, right?
So now technology allows us to do that. And I think that's, why you're here and doing what you're doing, why I'm doing what I'm doing is, let's talk to each other. You can't scale that infinitely, right? Technology will let us, AI will let us, chatbots will let us scale these things pretty infinitely, still in a natural way to have those dialogues. And so I think that's kind of important. We're getting back to where we want to be, not somewhere new. I think that's less exciting for some people, but I think it's kind of important.
The whole AI parade and all the hype. But I couldn't agree more with you because I was actually reading this book about AI from MIT that came out in 1988. And some of the very similar sort of fundamentals were being predicted back then as far as what they wanted to do. But, storage, network, compute just weren't, financially... I couldn't do that, as a company, as a small company, mid-sized company, or even enterprise back in the day. So I think it's interesting, to your point, these concepts are not new. A lot of the underlying ideas and concepts and white papers came about 30 years ago, and now we have the opportunity today. So all the things that occurred in the interim, like the websites and the hamburger menu and mobile apps, were just like, it helped businesses scale. And it gave them the personalization, programmatic advertisement and websites. We have more personalization today than we could even fathom, like 10, 15, 20 years ago. But the problem was, from what I sort of see, and I think what you see too, is that we lost that real opportunity to foster a relationship, in whatever context that may be, and now we're sort of coming full circle. Now we have these opportunities, whether it be voice or whether it be chatbots. So I think that's incredibly interesting. So to LivePerson's stance in this industry, I know that, Rob has pretty much said that, we're waiting for the first, company to get rid of their web presence.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the specific stance or the differential that LivePerson sort of sees itself in the marketplace, having been in the space so long with live chat and really creating that?
Well, I mean, I actually think we're trying to shepherd in the inevitable in some ways and be the standard bearer for it. So a couple of things that sort of set us up for success and why I joined this company is I think coming from that chat space, there's a huge appreciation for human communication and human-to-human communication.
Right.
And we don't subscribe to that needs to be eliminated.
Yeah.
Our view is we need to blend AI, machine learning, and human communications together in really smart ways that let businesses scale. So I think that's sort of a fundamental tenet of ours. Sure. I do think there's folks out there who have different views on that. I think we hew pretty strongly to that. We're not trying to be naive. We're not trying to... we recognize how hard certain things are and how easy some other things are, but we appreciate the sort of humanness in what we do. So that's actually, I think, an important approach. I think another one is we really do look at our tools as an open platform that we want to enable our businesses to extend and leverage and use, and we want to connect and interact wherever consumers are going. So we want to kind of be present wherever a consumer is interacting. If that's in messaging and iMessage, or if it's on Alexa or Google Home, then we'll support that. So I think it's sort of those two key combinations. And then we're investing in some really smart AI and machine learning capabilities that are built on top of NLU. We kind of look at NLU as becoming a bit of a commodity. It's going to get up to the 95, 96, 97% accuracy. I'm not going to compete with Google's 2,000 engineer, 2,000 scientists. Amazon, I know exactly the talent that they had. It'd be silly for me to compete there. They're going to make a ton of progress. They're going to change. Businesses are going to make a lot of money on API calls at scale for NLU, and that's really their focus. For us, it's like, how do you actually leverage that and use it in the right way, in the smart way, to actually create meaningful connections and communications with your consumers, with your customers as a business enterprise. So that's kind of where we sit. We're not grandiose in terms of, drop the AI in, it'll solve all your problems. There's work. Like anything, if it was that easy, I think we'd be much further along in many examples. So I think it's a kind of pragmatism, but also at the same time an excitement,
pushing the edge,
and pushing the edge in terms of where we can take things and how fast we can move. With this sort of balance of humans are actually still super important too, and we should appreciate them.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a really interesting and sort of sobering viewpoint, right? It's like we saw this hype that sort of manifested itself, right, 2, 3, 4 years ago, right? And we saw this like huge interest and hype and people talking about it, and then I think we're finally leveling off to something pragmatic that actually works for these enterprises. So that being said, so for brands that have heard this, right, time and time again, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019 finally as the year that conversational user interfaces are something not only that we have to look at, but we have to go to because our customers are there. Evident by Amazon Alexa, 100 million device adoption in a couple years, and the over adoption of messaging channels. So for like a brand in 2019, why should they be looking at it this year? And what are some initial steps they can begin to take to go down that journey? So,
I mean, that's where people are going. You're 100% right. 15 million texts sent every minute, 60 billion messages on Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp every day. Forrester says that there'll be 450 million new messaging users over the next 2 years. So that's like, more than the entire population of the United States is coming into this new place. There's a place. It's there. 450 million people are going there. So you got to go there if you want to be successful in a business. This is not 10 million. This is not a new cool trend. We're talking about 450 million more people going there. Facebook, WhatsApp, billion users. So this is where people are. It's how we communicate with our loved ones. Calling someone is rude in some ways, right? Why'd you call me? That's weird. Why did you text me? So I think fundamentally, that positions your communication in a real-time manner where you can actually start to do some of the personalization you're talking about. So it's where people live and work. So I think you have to invest in where the people are, obviously. I think why, in terms of the hype curve, it's kind of interesting. And we know this has been studied.
Yeah.
You can have the irrational exuberance, and then your sort of trough of despair, and then your kind of slope of enlightenment. I think if you look at the curve, those things tend to hold.
Yeah.
I think we are on that uptick now.
Yeah.
I can tell you there are some of the largest companies in the world who are customers who are investing. I'm not talking about, I use money as a proxy. This is about changing consumer experiences.
Yeah.
But I'm not talking about $1 million investments and $2 million investments. I'm talking about 10, 20, 30, $50 million investments in radically thinking about radical new ways of interacting with their consumers. And those companies are going to start to succeed. And we actually, just before the podcast started, we were talking about how, I think going back a few years, consumers became a sort of dominant force in new technologies. Right? We have these supercomputers in our pockets. Right. I used to joke when I was at Amazon or anywhere else, like, it would take 20 minutes to get the video conference to work, and I traveled to the Wadi Rum Desert in Jordan, and then with one push was video conferencing with my mom. Right. So it's like, I'm belly of the beast in terms of AI, and I can't get video conferences to work. So that's happened, right? What I see now actually is the enterprise, because of the sort of huge value in embracing consumers, in eliminating frustrating, high friction experiences, in the costs associated with being global.
Sure.
Right? Businesses are now global. They can't hire and build stores forever.
Right.
So the change that they can actually achieve through AI conversational is massive. And I actually think, if you're not thinking seriously about this, there's a very real risk that the big old slow enterprise are actually going to outpace us.
Right.
The small companies.
Yeah.
So I do think, again, we're on that sort of uptick. I think it generally gets quieter as people start to figure it out.
Yeah.
They're a little more skeptical. They're looking for applications that make a difference, not just throw in a chatbot. But I think we're going to see accelerate pretty quickly through this year and next year. And I'm not alone. I mean, you see it too. The analysts see it too. So if you're a doubter out there, spend some time, learn the concepts, try to figure out what works, what doesn't work. Be cautious of the AI magic of machine learning will solve all your problems. It won't. It's a tool. It's a great tool, but it's a tool like anything. But start to play around and experiment, because it's the change is pretty significant. We now see, we've been talking about the death of the website.
Yeah.
There's a really cool company called Thread Styling in the UK that's all conversational. There's a bank in Italy called Buddy Bank that's all conversational. We have met with the biggest banks in the world who have not heads of digital, they have heads of conversational banking.
Yeah.
We meet with the biggest insurance companies in the world, they have heads of conversational, this is a real thing.
Yeah.
And I think, like anything, it's going to take a little time to take root, but the roots are there now.
Yeah.
And we're going to start to see some I think some pretty big announcements over the next year.
Yeah, no, I couldn't echo your point, more so, because, I've been talking to some of the largest brands too, and it seems to me that they're finally, willing to talk about some of these implementations, maybe not talk about the sort of outcomes quite yet, but they're definitely building teams and resources internally. We're like companies from Wells Fargo to Booking.com to, Prudential are all working on, whether it be chatbots that are for their customers or internal facing line of business applications, they're all working on these things now. So I think it's really interesting to finally see we're tracking out of that sort of trough of disillusionment where everyone's sort of pissed off. And
chatbot was almost like a derogatory term, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm curious though, so there was a quote, from someone in the space, and they had said that it seems that there's this monolithic conversation every time someone talks about chatbots or voice and AI, and it's this monolithic conversation that is just not very practical, right? And it's almost as though that, this was his quote, he said, chatbots haven't failed us, our expectations of them have, right? So what's your take on that? Because we saw a lot of hype driving into the AI part, but at the same time we see a lot of applicability for specific use cases.
So I don't know if this is what the answer, but I think if you look at any type of new technology, any type of new offering, I think how it's applied, making sure it's fit for purpose is really important. I think the hype was there. People just started to like rush to chatbots, right? They didn't fully understand them. What I coach my team often is the magic in conversational design is actually in the errors, right? Like 85% of a great conversation is handling all the errors. You can design a really beautiful happy path. I'm going to say this, the bot's going to say that, I'm going to say this, the bot's going to say that. You can do that all day long. You can actually create really good NLU models for the expected utterances between both, bot and consumer. The challenge is we don't think that way, right? We think in very dynamic ways. It's very branching. So I think there was a mad rush of well-meaning technologists into the bot space. They built some rudimentary capabilities and technology. They didn't fully understand the science behind some of it, and also the theory in terms of conversational design, linguistics. And we ended up with those death spirals, like get me out of here, get me out of here. Same thing of like representative when you're on a phone. I think now we're starting to understand that. I think a lot, like I said, a lot of the magic is in handling the unexpected. So no, I meant such and such. Oh no, go back. Oh, I meant the blue one. I also want to do this. Oh, before we finish, I want to like that's the way we talk, right? That's the way we think. So being able to handle those things gracefully, I think, is a huge part. So I use that as an example. So I think the root is thinking about what you're delivering to a consumer as a design problem, thinking about your goals, thinking about the outcomes, and approaching it with the same rigor that you did when you designed your app and your website. You didn't just throw it up. We did when it first launched, Just throw it up there, and we knew the mess that it created. But now any company that has any type of success hired some really smart people. There's a profession. There's around design and information architecture and user flow and control flow and error handling, all that. All those principles, they're different. There's different ways to think about them, but they have to apply when you're building conversational experiences too. So this is common, typical. What I really hope, just to recommending folks out there, is we saw when the web launched, when apps launched, there was 50 web teams, 50 app teams scattered through businesses, even small businesses. And we created these circuses for ourselves to go and kind of aggregate together. And there's always the pendulum between centralizing something and federating something, of course, right? You don't want to eliminate invention and creativity. But I hope we go into this a little bit more informed and think about it in a little bit more of a structured way. And we see this in some enterprises. We see, there's 20 different bot groups still using 20 different tools. You want to experiment, you want to play, for sure. But I do think AI and ML, there is a little bit, this is not HTML. Like it's not, even just app design. You've moved from rules that are deterministic to things that are probabilistic. There's math and science. So there is some education that has to happen in terms of what are the pitfalls. And we do have to be careful that we don't kind of go down 20 different roads, and we do think about this as a organized process for delivering great experiences, not very just disjointed ones. So that's my big recommendation to try to avoid some of the pitfalls that we made in the past that we did see early on in this cycle. That makes sense? No,
I agree a ton of what you just said, because I think you're right? A lot of this was just sort of like seeing what are the limitations of this ecosystem, extracting learnings and building processes that are now systematic, and looking at these things, based upon, some structure of sort of approaching these new experiences, right? And, to your point, conversational designer, 5 years ago, probably wasn't even a job title. And not only do we have to create these new roles, now the new workflows have to be established too, right? And it's new roles and then new workflows and then tools that actually can provide accessibility to those new sort of divisions of labor internally within companies. So I think it's this sort of slow iterative grind to seeing, all right, well, what's actually smoke and mirrors and what actually works? And I feel like we're finally reaching that tipping point today. But I want to go back to something interesting you said about...
Just before you do, sorry. At the same time that I would say there's still lots of really interesting opportunities where you can move fast and experiment and fail. You fail fast and learn. You can... It's hard, there's complexity, but there's also, I think, being smart about where you go attack certain things. and to learn quickly,
Sure.
I think is sort of important. Right?
Yeah,
I don't want to scare people like, oh, it's really hard. It is hard.
Yeah.
Get experts, learn, you can learn, but then go and play and experiment and figure out what works. Just, I don't think, don't take too big of a bite at first.
Yeah, 100%. That's actually really interesting. So do you think just provided conversational user interfaces being, a way to scale sort of intimate sort of relationships and interaction with customers, do you think like the stakes are even higher to get it right? Because this is like the first time that we as brands have been given this responsibility and opportunity now to connect with customers, because I think what I've seen some statistics where it's like if you guys screw up or a company screws up the first time with a chatbot experience, 70% of people are not coming back. So do you think the stakes are higher with this new medium?
I don't know. I guess the short answer. I think the stakes are always high in terms of the quality you put in interacting with your consumers and your customers. So I think the stakes have been high. They've always been high.
Right.
I think companies that have not embraced new technologies and new ways of interacting have struggled.
Yeah.
And certainly those who've put out stuff that was low quality struggled. Yeah. So do I think the stakes are higher here? I don't know. I think mistakes can sometimes be more apparent.
Yeah.
And I also think with machine learning, mistakes can also be extraordinarily embarrassing and unpredictable. Right? Yeah. Humans we make more reliable mistakes. When an AI gets something wrong, it could be really weirdly wrong, right?
Yeah.
So I do think, there'll be some iterations of embarrassment that we'll have to go through. I think everyone will have a part of that in some way.
Sure.
But I don't know. I don't know if I'd characterize the stakes being higher here as they were. Sure. Because I think they were always really high.
That's true.
So
that's true.
I have a pretty high bar with the customer experience.
Yeah.
So,
no, 100%. Yeah. So I want to go back to something you said that I don't think a lot of people in this ecosystem are really touching on, sort of conversational design, conversational UX, because I think, companies understood the technology bit, and that's what we saw really put on this pedestal for the last several years, the NLU, NLP, context management, AI, but I think the other 50% is how do we structure these conversations? How do we think about, creating new ways of writing to get our customers to engage and to influence them to engage with us, right? So how does LivePerson sort of think about conversational design and, how important is that for these implementations?
Critical. Like beyond critical. Yeah. It is as important as your UX, visual designer, information architecture was, just a few years ago. So we have a conversational design team. Yeah. We have a whole training program around it. We teach ourselves, we teach our customers, we teach our salespeople, we teach our key contacts out in the industry. We have a scoring mechanism for actually assessing and looking at dialogues and conversations that could be human-based or bot-based. So conversational can be designed. Conversation can be designed for humans too, right? Like how you actually engage and ask the right questions. Right. And get good responses. So I think more and more actually how we communicate needs to be better understood. Technology helps us understand that, but there's a lot of research even in education and teaching, right? Asking the right kinds of questions, enables learning and information exchange. So we've actually worked pretty hard to embed some of that thinking in our conversational design practice. We have a rubric scoring mechanism called Sura that actually can go through and understand the goals and the drivers of a dialogue and a conversation. So it is a design process and should be thought of having that sort of part art and part science behind it. It's something that can be taught, and it's something that's professionalized. So I know you know this well. Cause it's one of the things that you're great at as well. So, but I think businesses need to start to exercise that muscle and bring some folks who understand. You don't take your visual designer and have them do that. It's actually opening up a world of possibilities for different folks with different skills. Right, like copywriters, screenwriters, authors. Suddenly can actually do things, new things, and participate in this new world for sure. Yeah, it's a very cross-functional when you think about it. Across the board from copywriters, screenwriters, and then psychology as well, and getting people that were principally trained in UX, and it's like this sort of
moving target almost, right? Because I think there's sort of two approaches to it, right? One, sort of this cross-functional effort to begin to define best practices and structures around that. But similarly, I think for companies that are positioned, that are sitting on a lot of conversational data, I think which LivePerson is uniquely positioned, I think there's an extraordinary opportunity to then sort of leverage both the sort of human effort and the data analysis effort and combine that and get to that place much quicker, right? So how does LivePerson sort of think about that for, having the opportunity to be in this space for some 20 odd years, driving live chat for such a long time, and now having this opportunity of all that conversational data, like what does that do for you guys to, maybe enable you guys to sort of hit some goals or opportunities faster?
So couple things.
Yeah.
First and foremost, we take data privacy as that sort of highest standard. I'm a consumer. I don't want my data everywhere. So we apply the same rigor that we would expect from many of the services we use. So I think it's important to state, and I feel pretty passionately that my expectation is other companies out there doing the same thing. Enterprise data is also their data, right? So we don't mix and match the data from different enterprises. We use data though within an enterprise and across when it's normalized, meaning we take out anything identifiable across it, look for patterns. We do use data to continuously improve the feedback loops in the machine learning. So as conversations evolve and sentiment, so we have a sentiment engine that looks for the quality of the conversation. We have goals, customer satisfaction, NPS, these different things are analyzed post-conversation. We actually look and feedback learning to continually improve the turns of the dialogue and create new examples to capture additional intents. We look for which agents or which bots actually perform better with different intents. So it's a big process. There's a lot of data. We understand the NLU, the sentiment, the entities, the facts, and the outcomes, and we actually combine those to continuously improve the overall experience. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, it's a way we actually bootstrap the identification of a lot of automations. We'll often have a company launch with human-to-human conversations, and then very quickly we can go in and identify the opportunities for automation and actually come back with the recommended dialogue. Within some conversational design tweaking, understanding of the error conditions and all the different tendrils. We can turn around a pretty high quality automation quite quickly because of the data and a lot of the know-how that's been generated from doing it across a number of enterprises.
I like that. It's a very pragmatic approach, that I see sometimes the access to good data for training some of these experiences sometimes is locked in like legacy systems or it doesn't exist. So I really like that pragmatic approach of saying, hey, let's actually implement live chat first because that's what you guys have been doing for 20 years and you pioneered that, and leverage that natural conversations to then sort of figure out, okay, within this distribution, what is addressable to begin implementing a chatbot possibly. And
then we've also built predefined vertical intents for industries where we've actually, we can actually solve some of the cold start problem by doing transfer learning. So we've developed intents across the telco industry or the banking industry or the retail industry. And we can actually take those intents in that model. No data is shared. It's literally the model. And actually use that to bootstrap intent recognition in another vertical as well.
That's awesome.
It's very cool.
You're getting off that starting line, 10 times faster because you already have these intents that are trained. I think that's really incredible.
There's some cool stuff going on with transfer learning and deep neural networks that actually will help not just us, but everyone start to kind of share the successes across different verticals here.
Absolutely. Maybe going back to the point talking about data and sometimes it not existing. I think there are a variety of different obstacles or opportunities throughout the ecosystem, depending on how you look at them. What do you see, just when you look out, across chatbots and voice, what are like some big obstacles that need to be sort of tackled, because I think you and I both have this like idealistic vision of where we can end up in 5, 10, 15, 20 years with ambient computing and not really having the interface as a friction point. What are like some main obstacles do you see? It could be in the tech side, it could be just like best practices, it could be just consumers just beginning to get more comfortable with using these interfaces.
So I think the single biggest obstacle for me
Sure.
is it revolves around privacy and data ownership.
Yeah.
Right, and there's a sort of tension and conflict here. I had an interesting exchange on LinkedIn with a reporter from Bloomberg here in Seattle. Wrote an article about Alexa and Google Home knowing when you turn the lights on and off, and then suddenly they start to know when you go to sleep or not. And it was kind of an interesting thread, and I started to chime in on a thread around Google or Alexa knowing when the lights are on and off is kind of the least of our worries. Right. If you're really worried about companies, anyone out there use nav on a car? Like that data is being sent to centralized companies you've never heard of are collecting that data, understand traffic patterns. If you've ever used a Price Club, little card you get on your keys when you swipe out of a supermarket, guess what? Every product you just bought is recognized and known and associated with your credit card to a company you've never heard of who is selling that data. That's just kind of a thing that happens. Your utilities know when you're actually home or not. Your alarm company, Netflix knows what movies you're watching, who's watching what. If you use EasyPass or any of the things for not just the government knows which bridge you crossed, but the company that the government contracted actually knows which bridge you crossed and when. Right. So our data is everywhere. Yeah. And it's companies we've never heard of. Sure. As we start to embark in more and more conversational and where we're actually expressing ourselves, I think people attention to that will start to raise. The conversations I have with one brand are not connected to another. Will they be connected? So who owns that? Who owns my dialogues and conversations? Right. Today it's actually the brand. It's just like when you call, they say, this conversation may be recorded. You don't own that conversation. Yeah. The brand now owns that entire dialogue, right? So there's some legislation in Europe, GDPR, right, to be forgotten. They have to go and delete. Will we see something similar here? So I think the biggest barrier is right now it's all fragmented. Sure. It's kind of all over the place. There's certainly some scary stuff going on. How do we actually make sense of that and go down this path in a smart way that, in my opinion, empowers me as a consumer? I would like to see data ownership. I would like to see me, and we've actually thought about this as a company, can we democratize your conversations, your personalized details, and give it to you so that you can actually give permission for that usage? So we're actually playing with some things as blockchain, an interesting technology to actually allow you to parcel out and know how your data is used in the future and by whom. And the reason I mention this and this fragmentation is issues because I actually think to really get where we want to go, I think we need to have a truly personalized experience. I think we want the technologies and the features and the services that we use to actually adapt and mold to us. For them to adapt and mold, so they have to know who we are. Right. I don't want to seed all that data though. Yeah. I want a degree of control around that data. So I think that debate and how it unfolds and who will control it and who won't control it and where it will be controlled, to me is some of the biggest challenges, barriers. This is interesting. So we can go into a dark place. But for a company, there was an interesting article written where a woman tried to avoid using Google, Apple, Facebook, or Microsoft. And you can search this. It's really interesting. It's very well written. She had to go like Stone Age to avoid those four. Companies hosted on AWS, hosted on Google Cloud. Like, it's really never been in our history where our data, our information, our daily usage is really in this very small number, controlled by this very small number of. People say, how can Apple or Amazon or Facebook, how can they be some of the most the most valuable companies in the world? It's actually they control almost all, not control, but they are part of almost all of your experiences in your daily life. Sure. That something has to break there, right? Because they're doing it on your data. The value that they're having is Google, Facebook especially. They're not evil companies. They've built business models by selling me and my data, right? I think they have plenty of altruistic people, in working there. It's just fundamentally that is the model. So I think this is anyone building experiences, thinking about communications, thinking about AI, thinking about using data, conversational experiences. We have to wade into this and have a much more open dialogue that's not about fear mongering. It's not about Alexa knowing when you're turning the lights off. but it's actually an open, honest conversation, because these are the things that are going to break or scare us or really cause problems. So long-winded answer, I apologize, but that's what I actually think that's the conundrum of our time.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I think I actually saw your LinkedIn post in real time where you were commenting back, and I was just like, that sounds really familiar. Where did I hear that from?
There you go.
But no, I think you're absolutely on the money there, because it's just like people want more personalization. But I think it's almost like we've grown up in this culture of technology and become entitled to the level of personalization we've received. And now it's like we're getting to this degree of like hyper-personalization, and people are now becoming more aware of technologies in their life, right? With Alexa and with Facebook. But I think it was always sort of there, right? It was always there from the get-go. And, I think to your point, we actually get better experiences because it's that sort of intersection of data,
super convenient,
which makes it really good, right? And if we have that data that's more democratized, then we can maybe actually provide more personalization than we have now. But you're right. It's like, how do we? What's that balance point? Right?
And I'm a little bit hypocrite. I use Google and Facebook everything. My world lives there, and so we have to figure this out, right? Because that's going to be the challenge of our time, and there will be something. I don't know if it's those companies, but there will be something bad that happens around this topic that will have to change the approach. And I'm not sure things like GDPR is actually the right way to go. It's extraordinarily heavy-handed in some ways. So, but I don't know.
No,
not to go to a dark place, but
no, for sure. I don't think. I think it's probably one of the most relevant conversations we can have today. I mean, we see like hundreds of thousands of data breaches, worldwide at some of the largest institutions. We see, technology weaponized, like things like Stuxnet that are like affecting real things in the world. It's not just, two personas, one digital and one in life. It's now those two things are connected more than ever. So actually sort of taking this conversation more so into the future. And I'm sure you and Rob probably have had many conversations on this topic. We know where we are today. We have an idea of what works and what is sort of pragmatic, but take us to 10, 15 years from now. Like, what is that vision that you guys have? Because I know you guys have been talking a lot about the death of the website and the fact that these interfaces will sort of, disappear into the background, and then me as the end consumer can sort of get what I want. Like, paint me a picture.
Well, I think you just did.
Yeah. Maybe I answered the question.
I think you kind of did. And I don't know if it's 10 years or 15 years out. I actually think it's closer to 5. Really? So I think a couple of things are happening. So I do believe, yes, the idea of the app or the website fades pretty quickly. I do think it's in that 5-year range. I think ambient technologies start to really take shape and take root in our lives. And what ambient technology is, it means that the room, devices, services are listening and available for me to interact with. Right? So display technologies become very dynamic. They're not just the TV on the screen, but surfaces actually become opportunities for displaying information to me. Microphones and speakers start to permeate our rooms and our spaces and our existence, and I think they get more built into our homes and our offices. I really hope our future isn't like being hunched over. So I think actually will improve the way we interact with humans in many ways. So I think that ambient technology experience it has to be based on natural communication. So both typing, voice, gestures, and recognition, image and facial recognition. I think those things start to combine and blend in smart ways. I think LivePerson will continue to expand well beyond chatbots and messaging as we enter voice and gesture and these other types of experiences I'm talking about. So I do think that's about 5 years out, and we actually get back. This is a good conversation. It's like a good Greek, tragedy. We're coming back to where we started. We get back to have conversations and dialogues. Whether it's you here in the same room, you in Europe, or you as a business or a brand or a service that I care about, I can have a conversation with you. So I think that's the goal. I think 5 years is out. I tend not to think too much beyond that, because I think things move pretty fast. And there's enough work to do to get there. And another 2 years, I'll think maybe 5 years out. But that's where I'm at right now. And yeah, I feel like I can go get it and grasp it. All the pieces are there. I think being really smart about how we implement and bring it into our world and businesses are important. And this data piece is, I think, a key part of that. And there's lots of practical logistics, like all that data. Just for some entrepreneurs out there, here's kind of an interesting challenge. All that data in that ambient experience can't all go to the cloud. It can't all be streaming. There's going to need to be ways of being event-based, trigger-based, proxies, local storage, what's important, what isn't important. So managing that continuous stream of information and data and making sense of it is kind of an interesting space to play in. Maybe in 5 years, that's something I'm working on.
Definitely.
That's going to be a big problem.
Well, I think we all look forward to that. So for people that want to learn more about LivePerson or see you speak, where can they see you? Where can they learn more stuff?
So I think LinkedIn's a great resource. We post everything on there in terms of where I'm speaking. I'm speaking at South by Southwest in March 10th. March 10th, and talking about the death of the website. So a lot of the topics we covered today and more.
Cool.
So that's a great place. And then LivePerson.com and our press page is always a good spot to learn a ton about what we're doing.
Cool, man. One question I always ask all our guests before we let them leave. Just provided the space that we're in, right? It's emerging technology. Sometimes there are things that are unknown. There's ambiguities. What keeps you motivated on a day-to-day basis? Like, what is that one thing for you that drives you, in your entire career up until this point that just drives you?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I actually often talk about that with my kids. I am a solver of problems. I love puzzles. So that's a big part of it. I like to solve hard problems. So that's kind of one just sort of more very practical part. Actually, I'll maybe it's not about technology. The biggest, just even thinking about it out loud and talking as I talk, I actually love building great teams and seeing teams actually produce things that are valuable and useful in the world. And it is less about the tech and delivering it. And it's actually, for me, I get a huge satisfaction from helping bring together a group of people who have fun, who enjoy working together, who collaborate, and then do something special, who are way smarter than me. And I think that's probably the thing that always excites me the most, and why it pivots in my career have almost always ended up, sort of taking a step back and starting over and building a team again. And it really gives me a lot of satisfaction when I can see. I had a meeting today where there's just a group of people interacting, doing something super cool, and I'm like, wow, that's an idea I wish I had. It was so good. That actually gets me up in the morning.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate all your insights, the way that you're looking at the ecosystem. Definitely have you back on. I'm just like sort of sitting on the sidelines waiting for LivePersons announcements.
I think you're more than on the sidelines. You're driving a lot of this stuff too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, Alex, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thanks.
And definitely have you back on soon.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.